at The Charm of It, I provide reviews celebrating the lighter side of board games. I find that I prefer games that fit into my life instead of requiring my life to fit around them. And hopefully my reviews will help you decide if a life fits into your game as well. To that end, I discuss both how fun a game is to play and how effortless it is to play. And today I will be reviewing Kingdomino, which is a game for 2 to 4 players, ages 8 and up, that plays in about 15 minutes according to the box, and is published by Blue Orange Games. What makes Kingdomino such fun to play is that you're creating your very own little kingdom out of tiles, and you get to arrange it however you like and try to make the different regions match up. And while you are playing against other people so that you each have the highest score, there really isn't too much interaction other than scoring points at the end. There's a little bit whenever you decide on your next tile to place, but other than that, really the fun of this game comes from looking at the little world in front of you that is entirely under your control and then turning it into whatever you want. This is a really satisfying way to play a game, and at the end of it you'll have a map of your very own kingdom. So that is definitely what I find most fun about Kingdomino. I find Kingdomino is a really well-balanced game, which is part of what makes it such fun to play. When you take a higher scoring tile, you're also going to end up lower in choosing order for the next round, and that really helps balance the power of each player and ensure that no one is going to become really strong really quickly. And I've never played a game where there's a runaway leader problem. The scores are always pretty close towards the end, as long as everyone knows what they're doing and has played before. I also really like that the different regions have different amounts of squares and density of crowns, and so that means that different players might decide that different regions are more valuable, and that really helps create a balanced feel to the game, and everyone can pursue a slightly different strategy and then come together at the end and find out how that has all worked. I don't find that luck is a major factor in this game. The tiles are going to come out in a different order each time, but you're going to see them all, so you can decide which ones that you need the most, and you can make decisions that give you more control over choosing a tile in a next round. The only time that I think luck is enough of a factor that it would impact who's going to win a game is when you're playing a 3-player game or a 2-player game where you're building a 5x5 square instead of a 7x7. And that's because in both those cases, you don't get to see all 48 tiles. And that means that if you've decided to start creating one large region, if it just turns out that most of the tiles that you need stay in the box for the entire game, then you're not going to score as high because of that luck factor. That's easily mitigated in a 2-player game because you can just build a 7x7 square and then you still get to see all the tiles. With a 3-player game, to me that is the only downside of playing this at 3 players, and I do think it's a better game at either 2 or 4 due to that reason. But it's still such a short game and such a fun one that I don't think that that luck impact is high enough for me to never play it at 3 players. As far as variability goes, Kingdomino doesn't feel that different from game to game. There are 48 tiles, and you use them all every time you play a 4-player game or a 2-player game with a 7x7 board. And so you're going to become quite familiar with the different regions and the artwork. And honestly, I quite like that. It feels like there are certain tiles that I'm more attached to, and I try to get them for my kingdom, and it just kind of feels like you're playing with an old friend. But that does mean that there's not a lot of variability as far as the components go. There's also not a huge amount of variability from a strategy perspective. Each time you're going to just be trying to make the biggest regions you can with the most crowns in order to score the most points. However, because the tiles come out in a different order each time, and the people you're playing with might take different regions compared to what they did before, I do find that my map looks different every time, and I really enjoy that. There are also a few various options described in the rulebook for how you can change the game a bit. You can either try to make sure that your map has a centered castle, or you can do a couple other things that make it so that you're playing with slightly different goals, and so that would be another way to add variability. I haven't felt the need to do that yet, but I do like that the designers included that as an option. I like the pacing of Kingdomino. Most of the game feels very steady and relaxed. Each round alternates between choosing the tiles and then placing them, which gives it a nice rhythm. Towards the end, there's a small sense of escalation and tension because there are certain tiles that you're going to be looking for to help complete your map, and there are other tiles that you might not be able to fit into your map at all, and so you do want to kind of see which tiles are coming out more than you did at the very beginning. But it still feels pretty relaxed all the way through the game, simply because there isn't a lot of penalty for not being able to place a tile. You just lose those squares for point issues, but you don't lose the game or give up anything else. So overall, I find that this is a nice, steady, relaxing pace. I really enjoy the aesthetics of Kingdomino. The colors are brighter than is my usual preference. I tend towards more antique and muted tones, but in this case I think they work wonderfully. Not only does it make it really easy to tell the separate geographical regions apart, which is important for gameplay, but at the end, when you're looking at your kingdom, it looks like a patchwork quilt, and it's incredibly appealing. The colors all work together, but they also stand out. The thing that I really love about the artwork is that there are tiny little scenes on a lot of the tiles. You have to look quite closely because the people and animals are usually drawn quite small, but the more closely you look, the more you see, and they're all kind of weird and quirky scenes, which I really enjoy. Also, if you're playing with kids, there are a couple tiles that have bigger animals. There's a silhouette of Loch Ness, and then there's a shadow of a dragon, and I know that when I was playing with my niece, those were her two favorite tiles in the game. And they're my favorites as well. I'm another animal lover. I also think it's really fun that you get these little 3D castles. They have no function in the game other than to look cute as they sit on your map, and so clearly the game designers and the artists were going for a whimsical, fun, lighthearted look to the artwork, and I think that they succeeded wonderfully. As far as from a tactile perspective, the tiles are really solid and heavy. They're easy to move around because they're on the larger side, which is really nice. I think that helps make it work for people who might have grip or dexterity issues. And this is one of those games where you get to flip tiles, which I find very satisfying. Kingdomino really shines at making itself effortless to play. First of all, setup time could not be quicker. Every player picks a color and takes their starting tile and castle, puts it in front of them. You shuffle the tiles and you're ready to play. It only takes a minute or two, which is wonderful. The play space required is pretty much an average table. I can't fit it on my coffee table just because you're building a grid and you don't always know what direction you're going to build ahead of time. So if you try to fit it into quite a small space, you do end up having to move your map around a lot. But even a 4-person average size coffee table is going to fit this easily. Playtime is also quite short. The box says 15 minutes. In my experience, games take more like 20 to 30 minutes. But I'm also usually playing the 7x7 board as a 2-player game. And even that is easy to fit into pretty short time slots. Finally, as far as portability goes, the box is small enough that it can fit in a tote bag, not a purse. This wouldn't be a restaurant game for me just because of the table size, and it's fairly heavy with the tiles in there, but I would certainly bring this over to a friend's house or to a family gathering or that kind of thing. So it is fairly portable. Kingdomino's rulebook is really easy to read and well laid out so that you see the important rules, and there really aren't that many rules. They give examples of how to play, and this looks kind of thick, but that's because it's in 3 languages. The English section only takes 2 pages. On the back, there's this really helpful breakdown of how many types of squares there are for each of the regions. I especially appreciate this when I'm playing with someone who hasn't played before. I put it in front of them, and that way they know that different regions have different layouts so that they're not expecting everything to be identical as they're making their choices. I have not had to refer to the rulebook since the first time I played because the rules are very simple and they feel intuitive quite quickly. Within a round or 2 of your first game, and there are usually 12 rounds in a game, you are going to have this down pat, and I love that. It's also really easy to teach to new players. The only thing you would want to emphasize is the scoring, because if someone focuses on making sure that all of their regions are connected but forgets to put crowns in their regions, then they're not going to score very high and they might feel sad at the end of the game. but that just takes a sentence to remind them, and maybe once or twice during the game also remind them and emphasize that. And if they read the rule books themselves, then that is really well explained. It's just you're explaining to them. So I think that this game has a really enjoyable, simple rules that work really well and are easy to remember. Finally, I like to talk about where a game falls on a mental effort scale, and for me, Kingdomino is definitely a Netflix alternative game, which means that even if I'm tired and just want to relax after a long day, I will happily pull this one out. Not only is setup time quick and the rules simple and intuitive, but each round I only have to make a couple decisions, they're quite straightforward, and I don't have to do a lot of long-term planning or strategizing, which are what takes most of my brain power. I find that whenever I play this, there's plenty of time for talking with whoever I'm playing with, whether that's banter or just catching up about what's been going on in our lives, which is another sign of a nice, light, relaxing game for me. And finally, I find this equally fun whether I win or lose. In fact, even if you told me that I could never score again and that I was just building a map for the sake of building a map, I would happily play it because I find it really satisfying to create my little kingdom and try to put as many of my favorite tiles in as I can and make fun shapes. Kingdomino is a really wonderful game. And to me, one of its great strengths is how it can take a group of players who have perhaps different ages, different game backgrounds, different approaches and interests, and really level the playing field so that anyone has an equal chance of winning. I think that's really difficult to do, and I admire how well Kingdomino has done it. Between that factor and the real effortlessness of playing this, getting it on the table, I think this is a wonderful choice if you're looking for a versatile, fun little game that will always create a satisfying experience and work with a wide group of people and situations. I also think that it's a great choice if you're looking for a game that is competitive but doesn't require anyone to be cutthroat. While at the end you do all count up your scores and whoever has the highest score wins, throughout most of the game you're just focused on building the best kingdom that you can. And there's very little mean interaction with other players, which I think makes it a great game for families or groups of friends where things can get a bit tense. Overall, I am really happy that I have this on my game shelf, and I think that you will really enjoy having it as well. Until next time, happy gaming!